Hey everybody, it's Paul Fontaine, Fight Game Media, and I want to welcome you all to the very first episode of UFC ROI, Holm versus Vieira. Now, if you're not familiar with the concept of ROI, I'll explain it to you very briefly. Essentially, it comes from investing, and ROI stands for return on investment. And UFC, when you're watching the broadcast, you'll see them often talking in the graphics about a fighter's ROI, which is the return on investment when you bet on a particular fighter. So it's expressed in terms of a percentage. So if a fighter has a positive ROI, that means you are making positive money every time you bet on that particular fighter. And if a fighter has negative ROI, then you're losing money and you don't want to bet on that fighter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run down the card for this coming weekend show. It's an ESPN Plus show headlined by Holm and Ketlin Vieira, as you saw in the opening there. And we're going to go over the ROIs on each individual fighter or each individual fight. And I'm going to advise you on which fighter you should bet on for each fight, and based on the ROIs. And if you listen to my In the Clinch show, I identified the top 3 fighters on the card in terms of ROI. But we're going to go over the whole card, and I'll tell you, if you are a betting person like I am, we'll tell you who you should bet on, and if you're not, or I'm going to tell you which fights to avoid. In this case, there's one fight at all that you don't want to bet on at all. So without further ado, let's get into the card. So the first fight, we got a women's strawweight fight between Elise Reed and Sam Hughes. And as you'll see here, Elise Reed has a 65% ROI. So that means on every $100 you bet, you're winning $65. She is a minus 150 betting favorite. But the one thing you want to be careful about here is in 2 fights that have had odds on them, she's never been a favorite. So we don't know, how does she do as a favorite? And as you'll see in some other fights, fighters do better as underdogs in some cases in terms of the value for bets. So next up, we got a featherweight fight featuring Felipe Colares and Chase Hooper. And you'll see here that Felipe Colares has a 17% ROI, so a little bit less than Elise Reed, but still positive money. And he is a minus 160 betting favorite here. He's also never been a betting favorite. So in the 4 fights where there's odds, he was always the underdog. But in this case, he is the favorite, and he's a minus 160 favorite. But he does have that positive ROI. Next up, we got a bantamweight fight featuring Vince Morales and Jonathan Martinez. And as you'll see here, Jonathan Martinez has a positive 25.5% ROI here. He's a minus 200 betting favorite. And here we actually do, as we get up the card, we'll see the fighters have had more fights. And in this case, Jonathan Martinez is a 4-1 record as a betting favorite with a positive ROI, 25.5%. So that is a fairly safe bet. Even with the minus 200, your $100 bet's going to win you $50. And on average, he's winning you $25 on every 100 you bet. So good for him. Next up, we got a lightweight fight, Omar Morales and Uros Medic. And as you see here, Omar Morales has a 46.2% ROI. That's really good. Now he is a minus 155 betting favorite, and he actually does have a 3-2 record as a favorite. So the one thing you got to be careful about, though, is with a 3-2 record as a favorite and a minus 155, he's almost he's almost 50-50 as a favorite, but you're not getting 50-50 on that minus 155. So a lot of his value comes when he's fighting as an underdog. So that's one you might want to steer clear of. But if you're just strictly looking at ROI, that's a good bet, 46.2%. We got a strawweight fight featuring Polyana Vieira and Tabitha Ricci. Now, this is the one fight on the card I'm going to tell you avoid at all costs because they both have a negative ROI. So even if you're a fan of Tabitha Ricci or Polyana Vieira for whatever reason, I mean, Ricci's got a nice record of 6-1 and Vieira's got a 12-4 record. This fight, there's no value in either fighter, and I would not recommend betting at all for either fighter on this fight. Next up, we got a middleweight fight, Joseph Holmes and Alan Amadowski. And here, Joseph Holmes has a very small 3.4% ROI as a minus 200 betting favorite. So you know what? There's still positive money there. If you just have to bet on every single fight, bet on Joseph Holmes. Otherwise, with 3.4%, that's a little close. I might just skip this one because even a $100 bet, there's only going to win you $50. But he is a 3-1 record as a favorite. So, keep that in mind. Next up, we got a middleweight fight. Eric Anders, former main eventer, going up against a guy, Jun Young Park, that, not a lot of people are going to know about. He hasn't had a lot of fights, but he does have a 10% ROI based on his one fight that he fought as a favorite. He's a minus 220 favorite. So, you're not making a lot of money here, about $45 on a $100 bet, but he does have that 10% ROI. But you know what? If you are going to look at one fight that you might not want to bet on, as in addition to that women's fight I talked about earlier here, with only one fight with data, it's not worth it. And Eric Anders has a big negative ROI. So you definitely don't want to bet on Eric Anders. Next up, we got a heavyweight fight, Jolton Almeida and Parker Porter. Now, Jolton Almeida actually has the highest ROI on this whole card. The only problem is it's only based on 4 fights and only one time where he's fought as a favorite, and that's with a 1-0 record. And he's a minus 700 favorite here. So that's a safe bet. But the only problem is your $100 is only going to win you $14. But you know what? He's 15-2. Parker Porter's 13-6. I'd say it's a really safe bet. Maybe what you want to do is throw this one on a parlay and get some added value there. Next up, middleweight fight, Dusko Todorovic and Chidi Kawani. Now, Chidi is the guy that I feel most confident in the results here, in the fact that we have seen Chidi Kawani fight many, many times. He actually has more fights where he had odds than any other fighter on this card, believe it or not. And over that whole time, going back 10 years, he has a 17.1% ROI. He's a minus 190 betting favorite here. So a $100 bet's going to win you about $55, but he's got a 9-1 record with 1 no contest as a favorite. That is pretty safe. And you know what? You can pair up Chidi Kawani and Jolton Almeida on a parlay. And you know what? You're going to be getting almost even money. I think maybe, $100 is going to win you about 75. So check that out. Next up, we got the co-main event. Big welterweight fight between Santiago Ponzinibbio and Michel Pereira. And that fight, actually, I don't have... oh, yeah, here we go. Ponzinibbio and Pereira. Here we go. We got here, the picture's not quite as smooth here, but Ponzinibbio has a 38.2% ROI with him as a minus 105 underdog, and he's got a 3-2 record as an underdog. So that one, that's pretty good value there, and that's with a lot of data samples. So Santiago Ponzinibbio, you want some value there, pick him as a slight underdog. And last but not least, we got the main event, Holm and Ketlen Vieira. Here we go. Vieira has a 49.6% ROI, and she's a plus 195 underdog. Now, here's the best thing about this. She has a 4-0 record as an underdog. Now, last week, I wasn't doing this show, but we had Jan Blachowicz, who had a 6-0 record as an underdog, and he pulled off an upset in the main event. And you know what? That cashed me my $50 bet there, won me $95. So you know what? For me, that's the best bet on this card is Ketlen Vieira at 49.6 ROI plus 195 underdog. You only got to be right 1 out of 3 times to make money there. So keep an eye on that. So there it is. There's your UFC ROI for UFC Fight Night, Holm versus Vieira. That's airing on ESPN Plus at 4 p.m. Eastern this coming weekend. Let me know what you think in the comments section, and I'll be back next week. I'll let you know how our picks did, and I'll give you some more picks for next week. So for Fight Game Media, my name is Paul Fontaine. Later.